Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today's event. And our first speaker is Vanessa Fachada. Vanessa Fachada is a Pharmacovigilance Manager and EU QPPV at Ariello. She has a master's degree in pharmaceutical sciences and over 7 years of experience in pharmacovigilance, working in both the pharmaceutical industry and with consultancies. She is also an ISO 9001 qualified internal audit auditor. Since 2014, Vanessa has acted as a deputy EU QPPV and EU QPPV for several companies and has extensive knowledge of MedDRA codification, XEVMPD, EU RMP creation, and PSUR medical writing. Our next speaker is Peter Kohut. Peter Kohut is the Director of Drug Safety at Ariello and an experienced EU QPPV. Peter's deep technical knowledge of pharmacovigilance helps clients understand the current PV framework and allows him to develop custom-tailored PV systems that ensure effective risk management and compliance throughout the product lifecycle. Peter started his career doing research in the field of biochemistry and later moved into the pharmaceutical industry, where he has worked for over 8 years, holding various positions both in clinical trial and post-marketing safety. And now, without further ado, I'd like to pass control to our speakers. So Vanessa, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and get started.
Hi, Sumaya. Many thanks for your quick introduction of myself and Peter. Dear all, thank you very much for joining us today in this webinar. Today we will discuss the topics that usually generate more findings in pharmacovigilance audits and inspections, what are companies still struggling to implement in their systems, and practical examples of those findings per topic. The entry into force of the new legislation on pharmacovigilance in July 2012 established legal requirements for marketing authorization holders to perform audits of their pharmacovigilance systems, including risk-based audits of their quality systems. So why are companies still struggling with audits and inspections? And that is what we will cover today. So this presentation summarizes the 10 key aspects of pharmacovigilance covered by the formal requirements, where companies are falling short and where they need to focus their attention to stay compliant. The way life science companies run, check, and document their pharmacovigilance activities is as important as the function itself, because regulatory authorities need to be confident that standards are being upheld and that nothing is being missed. So it is vital that pharmaceutical companies get this right and can provide evidence of strong SOPs on demand. Yet, although 8 years have elapsed since the European legislation on PV came into force, many companies are still struggling to fulfill their obligations, potentially causing marketing authorization holders to fail inspections, incur fines, and see products withdrawn from markets. Although this is the last part of the chain of events and would only be triggered by several critical findings, it is still a real possibility that all companies are aiming to avoid. Before we start digging deeper into those findings, I would like to ask you a question.
Thank you, Vanessa. So audience members, you should be seeing that first poll question on your screens. And that question is, how many audits and inspections did your company receive or conducted in the past 5 years? So your options are none, or between 1 and 5, or that could be more than 10. So go right ahead and click on the option that suits you best. And once again, that question is, how many audits and inspections did your company received and or conducted in the past 5 years? So your options are none, or that could be between 1 and 5, or that could be more than 10. Fantastic. So it seems like the majority of audience members have voted. So I'll go ahead and close the poll and share those results as well. So the results are as follows. at 11% went to none, followed by 47% went to between 1 and 5, and then 42% went to more than 10. So again, thank you for your participation, and back to you, Vanessa.
Thank you very much, Sumaya, for taking the lead on this one. We have good results, so it's very good to start with this webinar, knowing that your company receives regular audits and that the topics that we will discuss today are known by you and by your company. In my personal experience, when we receive an audit performed by a good auditor, we have the chance to improve our system. Therefore, I see audits as an opportunity to learn, to share, and improve pharmacovigilance systems, improving what we do and how we do it. And audits should therefore be viewed for the positive changes that they can bring. So the first topic that we selected for today's presentation is regarding the quality management system. And I need to say this one is one of my favorites. European legislation in pharmacovigilance makes clear that quality systems should be formed an integral part of the organization's pharmacovigilance system. There is a GVP module, which is Module 1, specifically dedicated to the quality systems. There are also minimum requirements regarding the quality system procedures that needs to be in place. This includes SOPs for document management, audits and inspections, deviations and CAPAs, vendor management, training, business continuity, and change control. They may have different naming conventions, but of course, this will depend from company to company. Although some SOPs may have been put in place as part of the company general quality system, frequently the link to PV processes is missing. And besides not having one or more than one of these SOPs in place, or not having them linked to the PV system, we can find different other types of findings in each one of these procedures individually. For example, common findings may be related to the lack of tracking or implementation of CAPA plans resulting from audits and/or inspections and daily processes, or not having the oversight and compliance management of a key pharmacovigilance service provider, being the latest, usually connected to the fact that there is a lack of a strategic audit plan, which is also a finding per se. Another example directly related to the audit procedure concerns the lack of qualifications of the auditors auditing pharmacovigilance processes. Not only matters that pharmacovigilance audits are performed by a qualified auditor, but it's also extremely important that this auditor is experienced in pharmacovigilance. And still around the audits topic, pre-qualification audits or qualification audits are something that is frequently forgotten as well. This needs to be planned using a risk-based approach. The use of a single qualification questionnaire, as I have seen multiple times, it is not enough and is not considered a formal audit. The change control process is also usually a process that brings findings in audits and inspections, either because some companies still do not have it implemented, or they have it, but they forget to include pharmacovigilance in the scope of the procedure. In case there are changes in key personnel, such as a change in the EQPPV or the deputy, for example, a robust change control should be one of the first things to be put in place. And be sure that the records for this change control will be requested to you if you have an audit or an inspection. The lack of business continuity testing, including 24/7 availability of the EQPPV or local contact persons, data recovery, backups, etc., it is also a common finding, but this specific one Peter will address further. Another area for potential problems is trainings, and this is also closely connected to the quality management system topic. This can occur firstly because it is not so obvious who is responsible for training within the company or who actually needs to receive this PV training. And companies can adopt, of course, different strategies. Depending on the organization, the remit for organizing training could fall under the HR department, the quality leadership, or even the pharmacovigilance department itself. That is why having SOPs with clearly defined responsibilities is essential. What's less obvious is that everyone in the company will need to receive some kind of pharmacovigilance training, which should be adequate for the level of their involvement in pharmacovigilance activities. This includes from the most senior managers to manufacturing teams. And this is because anyone can find themselves the recipient of safety information, which means everyone needs to know what action to take and how quickly to take those actions, and whom to inform in the chain of events. To ensure that no training needs are missed, there should be a clear training plan and formal records showing which employees have attended which trainings and when. For the QPPV function in particular, the QPPV needs to attend also regular trainings in pharmacovigilance and have up-to-date certificates, and also being aware of new and updates in the legislations, the so-called regulatory intelligence. As mentioned before, quality people, especially the ones performing audits, must have at least some PV trainings too, yet this is often found not to be the case. The third topic of discussion today is contracts. Manufacturers, as well as marketing authorization holders and distributors, could find themselves the first port of call for a safety report. Therefore, a pharmacovigilance agreement should be in place and should set out the respective pharmacovigilance responsibilities of each party, who the QPPV is, how is the system will be managed, who is going to exchange adverse reactions and other safety information, etc. For a distributor, the obligations might be simply to forward all the relevant information to the marketing authorization holder, unless that company also has a remit for local pharmacovigilance activities. Minor findings could also be found in the contents of the pharmacovigilance agreements and SDAs, mainly regarding the omission of exchange of special situation reports or non-valid reports, and also in the provisions for archiving, retention periods, and the exchange of information following the termination of an agreement. What is therefore always advisable is to have in the first place an SOP describing the way of establishing and managing these PV agreements, and secondly, to have a template to be used for the different types of PV agreements needed. It could be one common template or even different templates depending on the setup and on the stakeholders involved. For instance, an agreement between the marketing authorization holder and the distributor could be different from the agreement between the marketing authorization holder and a local marketing authorization holder, for example. Even if the marketing authorization holder accepts to use the partner's template for the agreements, a template would always be helpful and strongly encouraged to have in place to be used as a checklist to guarantee that not only all the needed topics are there, but also that the information is aligned with the other agreements that the company might have in place. And before we go and talk about the next topic, we have one more poll question for you.
Thank you, Vanessa. So audience members, you should be seeing the second poll question on your screens. And that question is, what is usually the grade for PSMF related findings? So your options are minor or major or critical. So once again, that question is, what is usually the grade for PSMF related findings? So your options are minor, major, or critical. I'll give you a couple more seconds to answer that, audience members, and then we'll go ahead and close the poll. Fantastic. It looks like the majority of audience members have voted, so I'll go ahead and close the poll and share those results. So the majority of audience members voted for major at 63%, followed by minor at 26%, and then lastly, critical at 11%. Thank you for your participation, and back to you, Vanessa.
Thank you very much, Sumaya. So there is no right or wrong answer for this one, as we can have all types of findings related to the PSMF. Minor ones related, for example, with the format of the document, or even critical ones related to the overall content and lack of update. But from my experience in audits and inspections, and in agreement with your response as well, the majority of the findings I have seen fall into the major category, yes. So the pharmacovigilance system master file is one of the main documents of the company's pharmacovigilance system, and which should provide a clear overview of all critical pharmacovigilance processes and procedures for managing adverse reactions, safety signals. It should include all the key stakeholders involved, the details of the QPPV and their experience, documentation showing how the organization will manage compliance with legal requirements, key performance indicators, etc. This is why it is usually called as the blueprint of the pharmacovigilance system. In general, the expectation from an auditor or from an inspector when reviewing such document is to exactly understand the current setup of the pharmacovigilance system. So this document should contain all needed information and structure of the marketing authorization holder and the PV department and their relation to all key stakeholders involved in the system. New companies or companies that are submitting their first marketing authorization application in European Union need to be aware that the first version of the PSMF needs to be in place prior to the marketing authorization application submission. This is very important. Although it is acceptable that some information is not provided in the initial document, for example, compliance details because they are still not applicable, descriptions of what will be implemented should be provided. Be sure that if you apply for a marketing authorization, you file the summary of the pharmacovigilance system in the dossier, but you don't have the pharmacovigilance system master file in place, this will be a major, if not critical, finding in an inspection. The pharmacovigilance system master file must be kept up to date at all times. So there must be a process in place for ad hoc revisions as well as periodical updates. If the competent authority asks to see a copy of this document, the company must be able to deliver it a full updated document within 7 days. So that's why it's really important that we have procedures in place to maintain the document itself. And if the PSMF preparation is subcontracted to a different company, another oversight inviting a penalty might be the lack of the marketing authorization involvement in any document revisions. Frequently, as I said before, the deviations concerning the lack of update or completeness of the PSMF are compiled and considered together to form a major deviation. I have seen this multiple times in different kinds of audits and inspections. The last topic I will discuss before I pass the word to Peter is regarding the QPPV function and oversight. So the KPPV is responsible for establishment and maintaining the marketing authorization holder's pharmacovigilance system, and therefore shall have sufficient authority to influence the performance of the quality system and the pharmacovigilance activities, and also to promote, maintain, and improve the compliance with the legal requirements. So the qualified person responsible for pharmacovigilance will need to have all the time access to the pharmacovigilance system master file, which is the main document of the system, and also authority over its content, especially when this document is archived in a different location. Additionally, it is also important to guarantee that the QPPV has access to the global safety database directly or via dedicated personnel from the marketing authorization holder in the case that the marketing authorization holder, for example, is a different entity from the one from the QPPV and has the control of the global safety database. And this is especially important when the QPPV is subcontracted and when the majority of the pharmacovigilance activities are performed in different locations, which means that good communication channels must be in place. Remember that the pharmacovigilance system oversight and responsibility is a split between the QPPV and the company. So the QPPV carries personal liability for the performance of the pharmacovigilance system in addition to company responsibility. If it is demonstrated that the QPPV does not have sufficient oversight and authority over the processes, this will result in a failed inspection and potential fines. And these are usually considered major, if not critical, findings. Process could be related to safety variations preparation, submission and implementation, ongoing interventional trials, clinical trials, market research programs, patient support programs, post-authorization committees, additional risk minimization measures, KPIs, signal management process, etc. So the QPPV needs to have knowledge of all the system. Peter, the next topic is yours to cover.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. We are now moving to area number 6 on our list, which is less attention to risk management. According to the last MHRA PV inspection report, risk management is an area with the largest number of critical findings reported over time during inspection. Typically, these findings are related to routine risk management, such as maintenance of the reference safety information. For example, where the marketing authorization holder has failed to ensure that the patient information leaflets containing updated safety information were introduced to the packaging within the specified timelines, which is 3 to 6 months. The data reviewed during the inspections indicated that a large number of batches has been certified by the qualified person with patient information leaflet, which had been superseded by the versions approved more than 9 months prior. As the patients were not provided with the up-to-date information on product risk, this was assessed as critical, as it affected the safety or well-being of the patient and poses potential risk to public health. In recent years, there has been an increased number of critical findings in this area related to additional risk minimization measures as well, such as educational materials, pregnancy prevention programs, or additional pharmacovigilance activities. In another example, the marketing authorization holder had failed to take appropriate actions to ensure that pharmacies dispensing the company products were monitoring adherence with mandated additional risk minimization measures in accordance with the effectiveness plan that was agreed with the agency. As a result, the marketing authorization holder had no information on the adherence to the conditions of the additional risk minimization measures for a substantial number of exposed patients. This resulted in incomplete information being submitted to and reviewed by the competent authority in annual adherence reports to assess the effectiveness of the additional risk minimization measures. Again, in this case, the criticality was attributed as a critical to this finding, as it poses a risk to the right safety and well-being of the patient. It's important to know that although many experts may be involved in the development and implementing risk minimization measures, the final responsibility for the quality, accuracy, and scientific integrity of those measures and the plan describing them lies within the marketing authorization holder and with the qualified person responsible for pharmacovigilance. Next slide, please, Vanessa. Before we move forward, we have poll question number 3.
Thank you, Peter. So audience members, you should be seeing that poll question number 3 on your screens. And that question is, are local distributors included in your audit plan? And your options are yes or no. So once again, that question is, are local distributors included in your audit plan? So that's yes or no. Also, just wanted to quickly remind audience members that you can still continue sending in questions for our speakers. And we also have a handout for this presentation, and you can download that through the handouts panel in your control panel. So I'll give you a couple more seconds to answer this poll. Fantastic. It looks like the majority of you have voted, so I'll go ahead and close the poll and share the results with you as well. So the results are as follows. Majority of you voted for yes at 78%, followed by no at 22%. So thank you for your input. Back to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Maya. That's actually a very pleasing result from my perspective. I see that you've been listening also to Vanessa very carefully and that you have a proper planning in place because the distributors indeed are one of the factors that contribute to the overall PV system in place, and they should be included in the audit planning. Usually, this is approached by the risk-based manner. So, although they may not have a big risk in the terms of strategic and audit planning, they definitely should be included and be audited in a certain frequency. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. Another area or group of inspection findings relates to the inconsistent or inadequate collection and management of safety information. The findings in this area range from failure to identify and track all potential sources of spontaneous safety data to failures of reconciling adverse drug reactions, monitoring with medical information, and product quality. Both have an impact on the next downstream activity in the pharmacovigilance, actually, which is signal management and detection of signals, and as a result, safety signals are being missed. The ability to demonstrate validation status of a safety database is also one of the requirements. Failing to properly validate the safety database for ICSR management can therefore lead to significant findings. Especially small to medium-sized enterprise, which sometimes cannot justify the cost of a top-of-the-range PV database, should be looking into alternative solutions. Nowadays, the use of spreadsheets, for example, to manage safety information is not acceptable. Fortunately, there are multiple affordable options on the market nowadays. The next area that I would like to discuss is company mergers and acquisitions, which are usually, from a PV standpoint, connected with transfer of safety data from previous marketing authorization holders. Not taking this into consideration during an acquisition will have a bigger impact on all subsequent PV activities performed by the marketing authorization holder. Even if this is taken into consideration and the data transfer is performed, there may be some occasions where some territories or products in the portfolio are missed from the transfer. This has then further impact on several PV activities, such as signaling and production of aggregate reports, which as a result contain incomplete data, rendering the benefit risk assessment inaccurate. Next slide, please. Number 8 is ongoing safety evaluation of failings. This area concerns the signal management, benefit risk, and aggregate report production activities or systems, which are the key elements of pharmacovigilance, as you very well know. Common mistakes in this area include inaccurate sales and patient exposure figures being provided to the medical writing teams, for example, the inclusion of unrelated adverse event reports in the aggregate report production, failure to include relevant cases in the benefit risk analysis, or late updating of product information. Other issues in this group include failure to include and discuss all sources of potential signals in the signal management process or meetings, and the lack of rationale for the signal management and signal report frequency. As you know, each company has the obligation to determine the frequency for signal management performance, taking into consideration the nature of the product in the marketing authorization holder portfolio, such as, for example, innovative products, established use, generics, etc. And, of course, also the safety profile of the product. The frequency is then established based on these parameters. What is important to note is that the rationale on how the frequency has been actually determined by the company must also be appropriately documented in the MAC quality management system. Next slide, please. Poor integration interfaces between departments or with external parties to support complete and timely safety information. These have two interconnected aspects. First is involvement of various company departments in the PV activities. The typical ones represent medical affairs and quality, for example. However, there are other departments that could also generate safety data and are sometimes overlooked. This includes, for example, marketing, business development, legal, research and development, and others. One example here would be marketing department launching a market survey, for example, for a particular product that has the potential of generating safety data, without the provision of such data being routed in a timely manner to pharmacovigilance department. Sometimes even without pharmacovigilance and EQPPV even knowing about such surveys being conducted in local territory. The second aspect in this area is monitoring of the communication channels created by different company units. For example, ensuring that any general company email address are monitored and safety information is routed to PV. Or ensuring monitoring of generic company websites, input forms, or chatbots must be ensured. Also, monitoring of other company-owned or sponsored sites and digital media for safety reports is crucial. For example, product or disease-specific sites or social network profiles, patient support forums, etc. Failure in performing of any of this will again result in safety data being missed, which impacts all PV activities. Next slide, please. We have poll question number 4 at this point.
Thank you, Peter. So audience members, this is your final poll question, and that poll question is, have you received a finding related to insufficient interfaces between PV and other company departments? So your options are yes or no. So once again, that question is, have you received a finding related to insufficient interfaces between PV and other company departments? And your answer could be yes or no. And also another reminder to keep sending those questions in. We're receiving lots of interesting questions, so we still have time to get more questions as well. So go right ahead, send some more questions. Okay, so it looks like the majority of you have voted, so I'll go ahead and close the poll and share the results with you as well. So the results are as follows. The majority of you voted for no at 57% and then yes at 43%. So once again, thank you for your input. Back to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Sumaya. This is actually a very interesting result, which confirms the hypothesis that we have that actually this is an area that is sometimes overlooked and is not covered in some of the companies because of some of the departments that represent the typical ones are being covered, such as the medical affairs and quality that I mentioned, but sometimes the other departments that are not very typical are not covered. So it's very important to include those also and have efficient interface between PV. Next slide, please. Number 10 on our list is, which is actually the last group of findings, is group number 10 that takes into consideration archiving, backups, and business continuity planning. Findings in these areas have a common denominator, so to speak, which is the failure in maintaining data integrity and the possibility to retrieve PV data at any point in time. As you know, pharmacovigilance is a strictly regulated area that works with patient data that are both personal and sensitive. It is therefore crucial that control over access to this data is ensured and is limited only to relevant personnel, which means usually pharmacovigilance personnel. In case companies still store PV data in fireproof, waterproof filing cabinets, the access to those cabinets must be locked, and the information on who and when accessed the cabinet is retrievable. There is usually a logbook associated with that as well. But nowadays, most of the companies have replaced cabinets with digital data archiving and data backup. However, it is still required to verify that the systems used for this purpose, whether it's an on-site server or cloud storage, meets the necessary parameters to ensure data integrity and retrievability at any point. The cloud services, as the name suggests, may sound virtual, but in fact, the servers that are used have a physical location. When utilizing a cloud-based solution, the company should be able to choose and have oversight over where the data reside in terms of geographical location, for example, as this directly affects data privacy and personal data protection. Business continuity and disaster recovery plan is also a must. But to have it in place alone is sometimes not sufficient. It must be also ensured that employees are also trained on it and know how to operate in special circumstances. For example, when the office is inaccessible for some reason, or the computers are being stolen or lost. Business continuity plan must also undergo periodic testing, and this testing should be documented. For example, mock testing of backup failures. Usually critical service providers, such as cloud storage providers or safety database providers, typically have their own business continuity planning and perform disaster recovery testing by themselves, and the plans and the results of those tests can be provided upon request, especially in case of audit. Next slide, please. To conclude our topic, we would like to present also a case study for one of our clients, which was a global biotechnological company that RELO has assisted in successful completion of an inspection. The inspection took place on site at one of our vendors in local territory. There were 3 parties involved in this setup: RELO, vendor, and the client. And
Peter,
there were some challenges.
Sorry, Peter, can I just interrupt? For some reason, your voice is coming a little low on my end. If you could just maybe raise your voice or bring that audio system just a bit closer to your end. Sorry to interrupt you. Just wanted to make sure it was coming loud and clear.
Thank you very much, Vanessa.
Okay. All right.
Is it better now?
It's better. Thank you, Peter.
Okay. So the challenges that we were facing was navigating the various roles and responsibilities between RELO and vendor and the client. As there were different locations and time zones involved, there was a risk of miscommunication and information being delayed due to time differences. Therefore, the coordination was very critical. We had to establish a communication pathway between the client and our local vendor, enabling all parties to function efficiently to support documentation. The solution that we implemented was on various levels. We executed a set of oversight activities, preparation and governance meetings, defining roles and responsibilities, and flow of the data and information for the inspection. Prior to the inspection, we performed an analysis of the scope and prepared for potential queries. Started collecting data and documents in advance, creating a cloud repository for all involved parties for tracking and quick retrieval of the data during the inspection. Based on the inspection's agenda, individuals to be interviewed were identified, they were trained, and roles and responsibilities were defined. As part of the preparation, also intelligence on civil inspection was gathered, and the intel was shared with both local vendors and the client. With that approach, the client successfully passed the audit. Our team fostered collaboration, demonstrating strong project management, quality management systems, and other processes, delivering faster results that avoided delays in the inspection timeline. While the project was complex, the communication partnership empowered us to achieve a common goal, which was a success of the audit. The experience was described by the client as phenomenal. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, to summarize today's presentation, with the complexity of the regulatory landscape and so many elements to get right, it's not surprising that the companies and the PV departments are still getting some things wrong. It is worth seeking an unbiased feedback on current provisions from professionals with experience of a diverse range of approaches and systems who can bring the latest best practices or perform a gap analysis that can help in further actions and target remedial action. The European Union is constantly aiming for more clarification and updates to its guidance documents so that pharma companies have a better understanding what to aim for. But it's also important not to wait. In the current situation, competent authorities are starting to perform more and more remote inspections, which is likely to lead to increased coverage and frequency as the capacity of the inspectors increases. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. With that said, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. For more information, please visit our website to see the services that Ariel is offering, where you can also find the guide to the pharmacovigilance audit success. Please also feel free to contact myself or Vanessa via email. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Vanessa and Peter, for that very interesting presentation. And that does bring us to our Q&A portion, audience members. And you can still send in questions right now, but I'll start off with the questions that we just received. So first question is it enough for the MAH to have an annual audit plan to cover internal audits and audits to PV partners?
Hi, Sumaya. I can take that one. No, the answer is no. There is also a need to have a strategic audit plan covering a period between 2 to 5 years. So this audit strategy includes a list of the audits that could reasonably be performed. The audit strategy is used to outline the areas highlighted for the audit topics, as well as the methods and assumptions, including risk assessment, on which the audit program is based.
Fantastic. Thank you, Vanessa. And our next question is, do we update the PSMF entirely within 7 days, or do we have 7 days to deliver the most up-to-date PSMF?
Actually, we have 7 days to deliver the most up-to-date PSMF to the authorities. This is a short period of time. That's why we need to have the PSMF updated at all times. But of course, if we have some issue that we want to update before we deliver the PSMF to the authorities, we can also perform that update if we can manage to do it in 7 days.
Fantastic. Thank you, Vanessa. And our next question is, how often should the PSMF be updated?
Wow, many questions on PSMF, and I love it. There is actually no defined periodicity for reviewing the PSMF, but the PSMF should always be kept up to date, as I just said. The periodicity could be adjusted and should be adjusted to the type of system that you have in place. If your system does not suffer many updates and changes in procedures or structures, and if you have a constant product list, it should be enough that you review your system every year. But in the other way, if you have a system that is constantly changing, if you are adding lots of new territories and products, and if you have other types of changes in critical pharmacovigilance procedures, you should have a process to review it more frequently, for example, on a quarterly basis. It will really depend on the system that you have in place. The GVPs does not say to you, you need to do it quarterly or 6 monthly or annually. You need to decide based on the type of system that you have.
Fantastic. Thank you once again, Vanessa. And our next question is it acceptable that the PV quality management team is reporting to the QPPV, or should they be independent from the QPPV like auditors?
That is also an interesting question. With regards to the reporting lines, I think it's not that important. Maybe there could be some kind of conflict of interest if this is the question that asked. But typically, the quality department and the PV department are separate. So they usually closely cooperate. There are typically governance meetings held between the two departments to keep actually the QPPV on top of things, both with regards to the strategic audit planning and the audits that are being conducted. But those units typically operate separately. But I wouldn't see a problem where if the quality team would be under that.
Great, thank you, Peter. And our next question is there a requirement to have a procedure in place outlining the auditors will be qualified and how to qualify auditors?
I would say that that should be part of your auditing procedure to define what are the minimum requirements for your auditors, how do you keep the auditors qualified? Because it doesn't matter only to have the auditor with the certification. The auditor should continually do audits to keep their qualification. And so that's something that is also needed to be stated in your procedure. As well as we touched a little bit on the topic before about the independency of the auditor. So that should be outlined in the procedure as well.
Great, thank you, Vanessa. And our next question is, how often the reconciliation between product quality complaints and ICSRs should be performed?
Yes, so typically this is performed on a monthly basis, although it depends on the volume of the data. But the typical frequency is monthly. It could be extended to quarterly sometimes, but I wouldn't go beyond quarterly. But preferably monthly.
Great, thank you, Peter. And our next question is, how do you see PSMF location declaration in the COVID-19 context? Does the QPPV or deputy need to be present at PSMF location all the time?
More questions about PSMF. So actually, GVP says that the PSMF can be located where the QPPVs or where the main pharmacovigilance activities take place. So even without a COVID-19 situation, QPPV can be located in a different location than the PSMF master file. And additional to that, I think that the majority of the companies have now implemented electronic systems and cloud-based systems. So even though the QPPV may not be located in the same location as the file itself, it should be accessible at all the times to the QPPV. So I don't really think it was impacted in that way by COVID-19.
Great, thank you, Vanessa. And our next question is, in case a company is launching a market survey, does the PV and or EQPPV need to be informed?
Yes, as we actually already discussed in the presentation, for GVP, the market survey is classified as a research program, basically, where collection of data and findings about the company medicinal product is performed. So as part of such survey, safety data can be received. Therefore, the survey must be designed in a way that the safety data collected will reach the PV department and be processed and submitted in line with the GVP requirements. They are typically classified as solicitude reports, and yes, the PV department and also the EQPPV should be aware of the marketing surveys, preferably prior to launch.
Great, thank you, Peter. And our next question is, what is the main point in audit checklist?
Okay, good question. So the way I see it is that we have all the topics that we need to cover, so we don't forget anything, and we also perform audits in a constant and precisely manner. So if we do audits to multiple partners, we want to be sure that we check all the same things within the different partners. So I would say that's one of the main reasons that we have checklists while auditing.
Fantastic. Thank you, Vanessa. Lots of very interesting questions. And our next question is, what is considered adequate frequency to measure the KPIs for PV system in the PSMF?
Okay, I can take this one. So,
yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
go ahead, Vanessa.
Okay. So that's a good question, I would say. Well, I have seen it quarterly and I have seen it on a 6 monthly basis. But when the company decides to go on a 6 monthly basis, it should have provisions to measure it more frequently, for example, monthly, or in a way where something that changes the compliance or triggers a non-conformity is captured right away, not to wait 6 months to put it together and raise a non-conformity. Would you like to add something else, Peter?
Yes, no, it's comprehensive, Vanessa. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And our next question is, for the screening of websites and social medias, should special situation reports be also looked at or only ADR?
Also a very good question, I would say. From my perspective, yes, they should be looked for because they are part of the pharmacovigilance data. So with regardless of the source that you are using actually, that is the source for the safety data, all safety data has to be taken into consideration. So from my perspective, also special situation should be.
Great, thank you, Peter. And our next question is, with relation to resources involved in PV, should this be listed somewhere?
Again, PSMF, PSMF one, but I will take this one, Vanessa, if you don't mind. So yes, correct. The PSMF should include the organizational chart containing also the number of the FTEs involved in the PV activities. Typically, they are provided in the section describing the organizational structure of the marketing authorization holder. The GVP also requires the inclusion of third parties involved, actually, such as, for example, licensed partners or CRO.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peter. And that does bring us to the last portion for the Q&A portion. That was our last question. We did receive lots of questions, so keep sending those questions and I'll quickly show that email contact information as well. But thank you, Peter and Vanessa, for answering all of those questions, and thank you to everyone for sending in all of those very interesting questions. If you couldn't attend to your questions, you can quickly jot this down, the contact information on your screens. So go ahead, quickly jot those down if you have further questions. Same thing. And if we couldn't get to your questions today, the team at Ariello may follow up with you later on as well. So thank you everyone for participating in today's webinar. You will be receiving a follow-up email from Xtalks with access to the recorded archive for this event. A survey window will be popping up on your screens. Your participation is appreciated as it will help us improve our webinars. Now, I'm about to send you a link in your chat box. You'll be able to view the recording of this event on this page, and you can also share this link with your colleagues when they register for the recording as well. So I'll send you that link, keep that link on you, and you can send that to your colleagues as well. Now, please join us in thanking our speakers once again, Vanessa, Fachada, and Peter Kohut, for that fantastic presentation. We hope you found this webinar informative. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.